What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Last video we got our VS Racing Turbo installed on the Mustang, as well as getting our 4-inch exhaust all mocked up, welded up, and installed. And I did end off that last video. The front of the car was in the air, still on jack stands. So if you were wondering about our clearancing issue, if I had any issues there, as you can see, it runs, it tucks up real close to the firewall, up across the top and over into our turbo. There's the bump stop there on the shroud that goes around the coil spring. Now I never had any clearancing issues on our last exhaust. It was 3.5, our newest 4, so it's a little bit bigger than my original exhaust I had in this car. I never had any issues then. I have bounced up and down the car this time, and it doesn't seem like I'm going to have any issues with this new exhaust. So, I mean, like I said, it took the same route, just a little bit larger in diameter. But I did have a slight exhaust leak when I ended the last video. Really small. I took care of most of it before ending the video, but I did still have a small one. But so, what I did to fix that is I loosened up all the bolts, took the exhaust back out of the car. I did manage to trim my V-band clamp here. That way to make sure I had it was not hitting, it wasn't holding the turbo over. I did move the radiator over, of course, too, to help give me some clearance between the compressor housing and the shroud. As you can see, I do have room. It's not a whole lot, but it's not touching anymore, so that's good. So I was able to move everything over, clearance just a little bit more. Everything seals up nice now. It has no more exhaust leak. Sounds good. This car is much happier with the larger turbo, especially that back housing. It just sounds happier. So, but now that we've got all that installed in the car, I've gone ahead and drug out our 8.8. I've also got a new differential cover / girdle. Now it's just an eBay brand. If I like, once I install it over there, I will definitely put links in the description for all the parts that I got for this rear end this time around. A set of 355 gears. The 380s that are in this car, when I hit the end of the track, would bounce off the rev limiter a few times, and I want to kind of keep that from happening. So 355 should at least give me a few hundred extra RPMs to keep from doing that. Those of you that are new or just tuning in, this is a factory 8.8 out of a 2001 Ford Explorer. It has factory 31 spline axles, and there are 2 different styles of this axle. One's got I believe one's 2 3/4 inch axle housing. The Explorers or the trucks have the 3-inch, and that's what this is. This has a 3-inch with the 31 spline axles in it. So I pulled this out of my local junkyard. I paid $180 for it. All the upgrades and everything that we've done to this are from eBay. So that's where I like to get all my parts. But anyways, enough about all that. If you've never done it before, when you pull the cover off, there is let's get this thing rotated around for you so you can see. There's a 5/16 bolt or 8mm. Either one, we'll pull that one out. Once that bolt's out, this pin slides out. Once you get the pin slid out, you can rotate it to get these squares out. Now, if you don't have a mini spool, you can leave these gears in there, really. All you do is push the axles forward. It's got some C-clips in there you pull out. You can use a magnet or push them at the bottom. If you don't have a magnet, then once you get everything out, you can dig them out by hand. You can flip the cover out. They'll usually fall out. But get myself set up. We'll get the mini spool removed, get the axles out of the housing, and get ready to pull the carrier out. axles are out. Mini spool is out. I've also gone ahead and removed these outer caps as well, the carrier caps, the main caps for the carrier. Those are removed. I have not pulled the carrier apart yet. I just took those off. Before I take the carrier out, I want to kind of show you guys a couple things that I do before removing it. And that is to get myself set. You can see I got a little dial gauge set up, and it's on a magnetic base. Now you can buy those from Harbor Freight or local tool stores. I'm not quite sure how much I paid for that, but it was not expensive. They're Harbor Freight. They're cheapies, but I don't use them for anything other than just kind of basic checking. I've always got the box for them, and for everything I do at home, they've worked out really well. So, anyways, before I pull the carrier out, there's a couple things I like to check before I do, and that is get our little gauge set up. Make sure she's touching the end of the ring gear there. Set our little dial to 0, and just see what kind of lash I have in this ring and pinion setup before pulling it out. So you can see 0, 13, 0, 13, so this ring and pinion sets has about 13 thousandths lash, which is within spec. I believe spec is somewhere on these, it's around 10 to 15, I believe. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I don't have a book for it. I always just kind of look up on the internet, watch YouTube as well. But I've done these, I've always put them around the same of where they were when they came apart. So when I take this thing apart and I drop the new pinion in there, I'll get it within a thousandth or two of where this one's at. So this one's at around 13 thousandths. If I got it around 10, 12 thousandths, I figure we're good. And that's about where it should be anyways. So at least that's how I've done it, and I haven't had an issue. Another thing I like to do as well is when you get your new kit, your new installation kit, they give you this little grease here. It's kind of like a paint grease to put on your ring gear. Then you can run the ring gear over through the pinion, and it kind of shows you where the pinion's sitting in relation to the ring gear teeth itself. So it'll kind of give you a little paint marking here. Tells you where the pinion's sitting. I like to do that on the old as well, and just put a little bit in there. Check it as well. That way I kind of have a reference on where it sat before. So if I go to put this thing together, all of a sudden the grease is way up or way low, then I've got something wrong, or something is just not sitting the way it's supposed to. So I do that just to kind of give me reference. Another thing I like to do as well as the paint marker, is if you got a little piece of flat bar or something like this, show you guys. I've got this set up right there, the holes drilled. Just kind of put it there and there. You can use kind of like the factory hardware to hold the old diff cover on. Doesn't have to be super tight, just make sure it's snug. Apologize for bouncing around. And then I will use a stick, or I like to use my little caliper here. Basically, as you can see, I have a hole drilled in the center. You can go off the side if you don't have it. Just basically open this guy all the way up, go down, rest it against there, just so it hits the top of, see if you can get in there, top of the pinion. Let's see if I can't get a light on in there for you guys. So there you go. So you can see it's hitting the top there, goes across there. I got a hole drilled in the center there, so when it goes down, I hit. As you can see there, I hit. It rests on this little plate. Oops. That is not good for those. But another way for me to check pinion depth, just quick and simple. That way when I put the new one in, make sure I got it close. So, but yeah, just some of the things I like to do when I pull some of these apart when I'm changing the gears myself. So I'll go ahead and get myself set up, put some grease on the ring gear there, double check to see where it's sitting, get the carrier out, and then we'll check the depth of the pinion as well. And before we remove that, get everything apart, get it cleaned up, get ready to install our new stuff. All right, so we put the grease on the ring gear here, as you guys saw, ran it down into the pinion, ran it back and forth. Now when you do that, so you get a really good mark, is make sure you hold a load on the pinion, have your hand there and just kind of hold it against the ring gear one direction, run it, and then hold tension on the pinion gear, bring the ring gear back. That way it wears into the ring gear, kind of wears the grease paint off the areas where it's contacting, and I'll show you kind of what that looks like. So if you get in there, you can see where this pinion was hitting, which is pretty good actually. It's wearing nice in this. It looks like it's running right close to the center. You can see because I held tension on the pinion and then ran this against it, it wore the grease paint off where it made contact there on both sides of the gear. Because it's grease, if you don't hold any kind of tension on it or a load to kind of help wear it off, it's really hard to see. So if you just hold tension on it, it makes it that much easier. It helps you out that much more when you're going to check and stuff like this. Same idea when you put the new stuff in, but all right, so now we got that checked. I'm gonna go ahead and get the ring gear or the carrier out of this thing, get it set off to the side, check our pinion depth in relation to the housing, and then get that out as well. All right, so you can see we got our pinion depth checked, got it knocked out of the housing, gone ahead and removed the old bearing races, installed a new inner race. I have not installed the new outer race yet, and gone ahead and pulled the ring gear off the old carrier there. Now, show you guys here real quick why I like to check depths prior to taking everything apart. It's just kind of a good practice. So here is the 373 pinion and ring gear over here that we took out of the housing, and here is our new 355 ring and pinion. Move that over. So if you take this guy here, and put him next to our old one. As you can see, the differences. This one being Ford, this one being an off-brand. Now, I'll show you guys something a little bit, because this is an off-brand one. Like I said, that's Ford. Down here, I decided to grab my 331s off the shelf. Now, these are Ford racing gears. So, this is a 331 pinion. And we're going to set that next to our 373. Now you can see the difference there. Pretty much identical. Now, being Ford parts, I'm sure they do that for a reason, right? They don't need someone in there measuring depths and all that stuff while they're putting all these things together. So they make it to where they've already done the math for you. So you can take the Ford parts out of a Ford housing. As long as you buy Ford parts, it looks like you can just drop them right back in without doing a bunch of measuring and stuff like that. You might have to fine tune it a little bit, but as you can see, or as I showed you guys, I'll show you, they're really, really identical, really, really close. Just by eyeballing it, you can see, let's put a flat edge here. Really close. Collars. Whoops, there they are. Ford and Ford, really close. Top sections. Doesn't matter too much, but as you can see, they're really, really close. Now you do the same thing with the straight edge over here. Let's get the 331 out of there. Put our 355 next to the 373. You can see how far off it is. And that's okay. Like I said, that's why I like to do a bunch of measuring prior to taking it apart, just to see where everything sat and give me a reference. So if you don't mind measuring and doing a bunch of like I'm doing, then you find the cheaper stuff on eBay. You don't mind doing the measurements. It's not all that big of a deal. But if you want to just grab it, take it apart, throw it together, then Ford 88, I would recommend probably just buying the Ford racing gears. That's not what I did here. So I'm going to continue to install my 355s. You know, but if all else fails, I do have a set of 331s on the floor. But anyways, so I'm gonna go ahead and get the camera set back up. Oh, before I do that, here's another thing I like to do too. Definitely, especially if you buy off the wall parts. Now, if I was just to take a bearing and press it on that pinion gear there without putting any shims in it, just so I can do my depth checking, I'd be pulling this bearing off again. Now, I don't own a bearing puller. I generally just cut the things off and buy new bearings. Just like you guys see too, I also don't have, but I don't have racing, so I use aluminum handles or aluminum plates, which, I mean, and it's always worked for me. I don't have the tools. And these things usually go in and out pretty good. The only ones I don't like to do it to is the bearings. So I have a dummy bearing, just with the center is ground out. So I can take my new gear there, put my shims on if I need. So like I've got this shim pack right here. Go ahead and put it on our new pinion. Take this bearing and it drops right on. So now I can pretty much drop it in the housing, then put my little bar across, double check the depth of the pinion, see where it's at, and go ahead and install my ring gear on the carrier as well. Get that set into place, and then I can start making my final adjustments for there. Because of the way everything's made, I'm assuming the ring gear is going to be a tad bit thinner as well, so we're going to have to shim the carrier over to meet our backlash, which is fine. That's another reason why I like to take all those measurements, use the paint, just so I have a reference on where everything sat prior to me taking it apart. So go ahead and get myself set up and drop in the new pinion, get the ring gear on the carrier, get that put in, and see where we gotta go from there. All right, got our pinion installed. As you guys seen, I put the little bar across. I put the pinion in and put all the shims in there to bring it to the same height as the last pinion was before we took it apart. Went to put our carrier inside the rear end here, or the housing. Noticed that the couldn't get the pinion to go all the way down because the carrier to go all the way down. The pinion was up a little bit too high. So I pulled the carrier back out, decreased our shim pack underneath the pinion by half, put the pinion back in, went to drop the carrier in. The carrier went all the way down, but still didn't have quite the amount of backlash just by feel that it had before. So I pulled the carrier back out, decreased the shim pack by half again, dropped the carrier back in its place, and everything looked fine. Everything felt good. So I installed the outer bearing and flange on the outside of the housing, bolted that down, put the nut on. That way it held our pinion tight to check backlash. I will be putting a link to a PDF that I found for the Ford housing, Ford gears and all that stuff. It has torque specs, backlash, preload, all that for you guys if you plan on doing it yourself. My numbers were wrong. It's not the 16,000. 16 is actually on the high side, off the chart, off what they recommend. Factory backlash for this rear end is actually, from what the thing said, 8 to 12 thousandths. We measured 13 thousandths on the other one. Apparently it had some miles on it, but 13 thousandths is just barely over spec, so that was cool. But anyways, I will be adding a link to that PDF in the description, so if you guys want to check it out. But everything felt good. We bolted the pinion down. As you can see here, I've got my dial indicator hooked up. We're going to check backlash right now. Actually, I've checked it already, but I want to show you where we're at. So I'm going to give the phone to my son Seth here. There he is. He's been hanging out with me the past couple hours, watching me kind of check, double check and everything. So I'm going to hand the phone off to him. He's going to hold it over our little gauge there, and I'll show you our backlash. Get it down here for me. Get a hold of that. So you guys can see it's on 0. There we go. 11, 0, 11. So we're at about 11, just around 11. Thanks, Seth. Yep. So as of right now, we got about 11 thousandths backlash, which is within spec. I'm happy with that. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and throw some paint on it, see where the contact patch between the drive and coast side of the ring gear, make sure that's where it needs to be. So we'll go ahead and get you set back up on the little tripod here. I'll pull our dial indicator off, put some of that paint grease on there, run it around a couple times, and see what we come up with. Alright, got the paint grease applied. As you guys seen there, I ran it across a few times, ran it back and forth, made sure to have plenty of resistance on the pinion itself while running the grease through to make sure to get a good contact on both the drive side of the ring gear and the coast side. Just so you can see, make sure it's sitting where it needs to be sitting. I'll show you guys here real quick. You can see the drive side is hitting right in the center, which is where it says it needs to be. If you come back on the coast side, we're hitting center or pretty close to center as well. And then you can see remnants or residue from it running through a few times. We are hitting center of the ring gear. So by their recommendations, we are good to go. All I got to do now is go ahead and pull the carrier back out, get the pinion pulled back out so I can put the actual bearing on. Like I said, I just used a dummy bearing, is what I'll call it, which is a good thing because I had to pull it out and readjust the shim pack for the height 2 or 3 times. Like I said, I don't own a bearing puller, so that'll cost me at least, I want to say $15 per time if I was to cut that bearing off every single time. So that's why I have a dummy bearing. So we'll go ahead and get this thing back apart, get the dummy bearing off, get the new bearing pressed onto our pinion, get that reinstalled, set our preload with the new crush washer or crush sleeve. Preload on this thing is, I believe, if I read it correctly, it's around 16 inch-pounds on the low side. I think it goes as high as like 29 if I correctly. I will double check that. But like I said, a link to that will be in the description. So if you guys are going to do this, you can double check. You got something to look at. But now that our paint grease and our backlash, everything says we're good to go, let's get this thing pulled apart, get the new bearings installed, and get it put back together. Alright, rear end is back together as you guys seen. Went ahead and pulled the pinion out, put the correct bearing or the actual bearing we're going to use on. You saw me press it using my little press. Installed it back in the rear end. If it wasn't for the fact that my wife Ashley was up here helping me set crush that crush sleeve and set the preload on it, I probably ended up on my back and kicked it off. Waited until I put it in the car to set or crush that washer. So it's a good thing she was up here. As you guys also seen too, went ahead and put the carrier back in, got it all bolted in, torqued down. I put some more grease paint on there, ran it through just to double check. As you guys seen on the video, I will show you again that she is hitting pretty close to center on the drive side. And pretty close, pretty close to center on the drive side. And about the same on the coast side. And that is good. Like I said, it's got about 11 thousandths backlash. I will include the link to that PDF that I found for all the preloads, torque specs, backlash, all that stuff. I'll put that in the description, as well as a link to the gears I've got in this thing. And of course, show you guys this real quick. Got this little eBay guy here. Now it's only about $100. Let's go ahead, set it down on the rear end there. It's kind of beefy. It's not light. I think it looks really cool. Hopefully it does what it's supposed to do. But that's as far as I'm going to get tonight. As you guys can see, it is dark outside. I tend to lollygag sometimes, take my time, go back and forth. So I'm going to end this video right here. Hope you guys enjoyed. Definitely appreciate you watching, hanging out. If you are new, please hit that subscribe button for me. My 1,000 subscriber giveaway announcement is coming up in the next video. So don't forget to turn on notifications. And again, Thank you guys so much for helping me build, hanging out, watching the videos, sharing with your friends. Catch you on the next one.